Well, hello everyone and welcome to another episode of HiX-Men Report. I'm joined by my famous Hickman 4. How are you all doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Excellent. Peter from all the way from New Zealand.
I am well. I think I was quivering with anticipation waiting to do this episode, so I'm not as well rested as normal. It might mean I'm a little bit more persnickety. Let's see how my opinion comes out this week.
I mean, we're only 47 seconds in and we already have an interesting SAT word.
I don't know if that would be in the SAT.
What is this word? What does it mean?
It means, like a little attitudinal.
Little
snipey.
That is a SAT word. Tyler, how are you doing?
I'm not as sassy as Peter, but I'm good.
I mean, it looks like that we're like the same core team, that we see in this issue. Peter is the Sassclops. I am kind of just there.
Typical for a female character written by Jonathan Hickman.
Shots fired in 1 minute 32 seconds.
Persnickety indeed.
So without further ado, and not wasting any much of our audience's time, let's start with general reaction. You're going to see that there's a certain theme because we talked about this before we started the show. So how about Tyler, you start us off.
I kind of is in the middle for, between liking and disliking this issue. It's not the best of his run so far. I would say it is actually the weakest of all the 6 issues right now.
Okay.
And there are a few things which bugs me in this issue, which I will go into later.
Okay. And so before this, which one was your weakest before this?
Before this was last issue.
Oh, okay. So back-to-back weak issue for Tyler. Zach?
Well, I thought that one of the charts was very well designed. And that is the nice thing that I have to say about this issue. I'll be totally honest. I've been up and down on some of the individual issues for the series so far, but we're at the midterm now. We're at halftime, and I think that what Hickman has contributed was a big, interesting, if controversial, retcon early on, and nothing much after that. And I think that he has been coasting on the strength of this Moira retcon ever since. And beyond that, what we have is a lot of characters who speak in flat dialogue that doesn't really match their established voices, and a plot about fighting robots that doesn't really feel all that different from other plots about fighting robots. So I got to tell you, I didn't like it.
Ooh, Peter.
Oh, it's scary when you get Zach and I back to back because we have that exponential effect. Powers of I don't know what.
I went powers of 1, powers of 10, that direction.
Well, this time it's powers of persnickety.
Yeah. So okay, let's say this. I think we were really stunned by a lot of what Silva was doing, especially in Powers of X2 with that vintage Magneto scene and his billowing cape. I think Laraz has reasserted that he is also a stunning artist in this issue. I definitely had many jaw-drop art moments in the issue, which we will talk about as we go through. But Emma, Nightcrawler, he really, really dug in. It's good that the art was nice because I felt like this issue was a sad trombone noise. We have now waited 6 weeks and $32 to see Hickman write any X-Men. We get to, as Zach alluded to, a pretty stock standard X-Men plot. And he basically confirms all the worries I had about him in this franchise. He has no feel for the characters, and 2 of his favorite characters, who are women, who we were excited about, because usually Hickman's so bad at writing women, they might be his favorite, and they might have gotten a lot of panel time, but the voices were wrong. So I kind of came out of this like, why am I spending this money? Why am I excited about this? It's just going to be the same old bad X-Men that I've been reading since 2012. And keep in mind that as you start to fire up your comments to argue with me, I do not like Hickman's Avengers. So if you liked Hickman's Avengers, my opinion probably does not jive with yours. But That is my track record, confirmable here on YouTube. And so I'm probably going the same way on his X-Men.
Very, very persnickety indeed. You know, I got the word now.
Yeah, that was a wonderful use of the word.
Right. So the thing is, I'm very excited about House of X. Like, you know, compared to Powers of 10, I really like House of X better. So I was very excited that after 2 back-to-back issue of Powers of 10, we're back to House of X again. And the thing is, the very first comment, like, you know, the very first what is the quote from the character, pretty much, "You make me so proud, Professor X." To me, that was a warning sign that something so inspiring, like, you know, just doesn't make any sense. Like, you know, just like, okay, it's just a word, is the beginning of this issue. And I felt that kind of continued. And I was kind of getting a little bit tired of, because as we have talked about before, I'm always into collected editions. This is the first time I'm reading something week to week. Certain things that happened over here happened in House of X 1, which was 6 weeks ago. I didn't feel the impact of it, because if I was reading it in a collected edition, this would have been 30 minutes later for me. But instead, it was 6 weeks later. And I had to wait for that. Like, you know, it just didn't. And as much as I love, like, you know, Sassclops, as much as I love, you know, Professor Xavier, who doesn't sound like Professor Xavier at all, bringing back to your comment, you guys comment about the voice being off. As much as I like that, I had certain issues with, like, you know, people, like, you know, you pointed out that the female characters, even though I liked Emma Frost much better than, but the thing is, Jean Grey just there, which, I mean, I don't know, it just, like, to me, just I'm beginning to feel the single issue effect, because I felt like a collected issue, I would have gone on from it. Next issue maybe the best thing then since sliced bread. I don't know, but the thing is, I have to wait 1 more week for that. This was just a dip, which I think is okay. I think it's okay when you're doing a 12-issue thing. I mean, we're just feeling it because this is like only thing we have to deal with this week, and then we have to wait next week.
Imagine if it was being released over 12 months, like.
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
I'm like,
I know.
Or Doomsday Clocks, several years.
Right, several years. But yeah, so that's kind of like, you know, where I'm at. To me, it's like, okay, this is lukewarm, but I know it ends with a cliffhanger. I'm excited to see where that cliffhangers go, but I'm kind of also sharing the same, you know, effect across the board. Like, but I think I'm more towards Tyler than two of you. So we're kind of like like this, you know.
So before we dig into like the actual issue content, let me actually throw out there something that Freya just mentioned. We all know each other from a collected editions discussion group, and we all are primarily, as you can see in the background of many of us, collected editions readers. So can we talk a little bit about the pacing here and the fact that we've been digging in for like 90 minutes a week for 6 weeks into mysteries, and for most people that's going to be the span of a 90-second page turn? I know we can't totally speculate because we don't see the whole shape of this, but like, how do you think this would be coming off to somebody who just read all 6 of them in a row? Like, what if somebody sees this video and they're like, I'm going to go read it now, I probably disagree with that Peter asshole, and they read all 6 of them in a row? Are they going to get a really different perception than we have?
Oh yeah. Because the thing is, like, here's the thing. I actually went and read it all 6 at the same time. It felt different. It felt really different because I was reminded of all the saber things happen, all the Cyclops being sassy throughout. It was bang, 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 bang. And it mattered. Like, it was much better than this week to week to week. Because remember, this is the same Cyclops who, as far as Cyclops is concerned, 30 minutes ago, handed Sue Storm a big, like, you know, a dish of sass. But as far as we know, it has been 6 weeks ago. You see?
Zach, Tyler, thoughts on the collected way that this is going to come off to this point?
I think that to some extent, seeing it in collected form will gloss over some of the narrative weak spots. But I think that doesn't change the fact that they are narrative weak spots. I think that it's a Band-Aid over it. If the plot isn't working on an issue-to-issue basis, every chapter should be able to stand on its own as an entertaining segment and a segment that advances the story and the characters in meaningful ways. And if it's not doing that, and if you're just not seeing that because you're reading a bunch of chapters all together, then Hickman would be using the collected format as a way of masking something that he's doing wrong as a writer.
Tyler?
I don't feel that strongly about the wrong voice, partly because I think they are wrong deliberately.
Some of that. Well,
Yeah.
I think we're going to need to dig into that, because I think there is a definite difference between the voices that Hickman is writing, quote unquote, incorrectly because there's some sort of mind control or some other shenanigan going on, and voices that he's writing poorly because he's just bad at writing voices. I think it's very easy to tell the difference between the two in these comics, and there is a definite difference.
Yeah. And I think that sort of like makes me think that if you read it as a collected edition, because you have the second half to sort of like, assuming I'm right, the second half to educate the weakness of this particular issue and the past issue, then it kind of will not appear that weak right now.
And the thing is, to be honest, like I kind of see comic book differently, and that's because maybe I'm a new reader, and it's the way when I started it, the comic book, the superhero comics kind of changed in a way that it became a long form storytelling. Like the idea of standing on its own as an issue, that was more of a Silver Age at that era thing. I feel, but nowadays all the stories are long form. Like even the streaming service, everything is long form storytelling. Like no episode stands on its own, hardly ever. I don't assign issue to be standing on its own, but that's just me.
It's a good point though, because we kind of forget, more so even than television shows or songs or whatever other thing you binge, hardly anybody is going to ever appreciate this single issue in a vacuum ever again after this week. It's just not going to happen. That's not how people read comics. Maybe if it was a comic book like Grant Morrison's current Green Lantern run, where the issues are ostensibly meant to be like, oh hey, you could pick this one up, it has this cool concept we haven't seen for a while, but that's not what this is. So it's kind of like, this is even our conversation is like a weird artifact of the past, because as soon as it gets to be next week, nobody will have ever read this issue just by itself anymore. There's some really interesting philosophical
I would say,
aspects.
Not to stretch this out too far, but I would say yes and no. I would say that that's absolutely the reality of the modern comic book industry and most modern comic book readers. To the same extent, if Hickman is doing what he's doing here, ending a chapter with a cliffhanger, and last issue ending that chapter with a cliffhanger, and the issue before the same way, that means that he is still writing with that single issue in mind. He knows that he is putting this out in a serialized format where each chapter is supposed to end on a really anticipatory note for the chapter after it. And we need to judge it on that basis.
And do you think that's because he shortened it down to 1 week release, like compared to a month release?
I think that this was certainly written with that in mind, and he knew that people were going to be reading it closer together than they would with a traditional monthly release.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Hickman always loves to play with chapter breaks and things like that. If we think back to Infinity, a comic that, at least on this side of the screen, we really, really love, that was not coming out on a weekly basis, but he very deliberately broke the interiors up into much smaller discernible chapters, so he would get those like page turn cliffhanger punches more per issue. And I just think, even if I'm criticizing some of the things Hickman's doing, make no mistake, I do believe he's a master of this form. And I think that he clearly kind of dilated how long he wanted each chapter to be and where the punch would be, and then uses the charts for mini breaks. And I think absolutely he did that knowing that this would come out weekly, and he would have made the tempo super different. There would have been more title cards, more hard blank page breaks if it was going to be over the course of months, because he would want you to feel the chapters more. I absolutely think he does all that stuff with intent.
Right. And the last thing before we move on, I cannot imagine reading Hickman's Avengers in monthly basis.
It was hard.
Oh my god, I can't, because I read it all in one go and it was divine. But anyway, monthly, I think I would share the same thing as Peter's feeling, but anyway, that's fine. Okay, so let's move on with the actual issue. Peter, why don't you start us off with the first?
Okay, so I'm gonna just kind of set the scene, and then we'll proceed around the clock from Freya with our reactions. Right. So in this first scene, we have Cyclops coming back to Xavier and Magneto after some elapsed amount of time and saying, hey, I've put the team together. And they share a very how can we say, portentous and ominous conversation between the three of them. And then Cyclops walks back out to the Blackbird hangar, and we get to see the team that he's assembled, which I think, given Cyclops, has some interesting choices that contrast old versus new. So Faria, why don't you start us off? What did you think about these two halves of the To Me My X-Men opening here?
So there was a lot of sassiness going on. A lot of the fact that Xavier is standing there with his hands behind his back like that was just weird as hell. And I was like, whoa, I don't know who this is and what is this happening over here. But to me, the one thing that kind of came jump out to me is like, it's a very theater, very, I don't know, it felt like more like, everything is like very heightened. Everyone is just talking like, such a brave face you're wearing for me, but I can hear the fear in your mind, Scott. I don't know if I kind of want that in Marvel Comics, because I'm like, hey, Scott, you're still looking scary. Like, you're looking scared. Like, I don't know. It just it feels.
Well, it's like peak creepy Xavier. Like, don't put on a front for me, Scott.
Exactly. Like it's just like, and then the whole thing. Although I would say the one that Magneto on the other hand came to the rescue, that or the righteous can never truly die. They live on, transformed into something immortal by their mighty works. For you to die, you would have to be forgotten, and no one forgets a founder of a nation. Dun 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 dun. Like it just kind of like, I think like that brings it home a little bit. But I mean, I was also, once again, it comes back down to like, collected edition, single issue fatigue. To me, it was like, oh God, get over it. Move on to the next thing, because it's getting to me. What is the next thing? I've waited 6 weeks for this. I don't know. I would have loved it otherwise, but this time around I was a little bit fatigued.
Zach?
So this first half of the sequence, Cyclops with Xavier and Magneto, I think this is our first case in point of the difference between deliberate off dialogue and accidental off dialogue. This first page is clearly deliberate off dialogue. Hickman is sending us every signal possible that something very weird is up here. And the way it's coming off here, whether or not there's mind control, whether or not they're pod people, I frankly don't know. It feels culty, and the tone is supposed to feel culty. It feels like they're almost not saying dialogue. They're saying religious lines in a religious liturgy to each other. Xavier is talking again with those strange, like, word balloon wide italics the entire way through, whatever that's supposed to suggest. It certainly suggests that it's not normal speech. And he and Magneto are behaving like, not like individuals anymore. Even their visual positioning on the page is showing them like they are two halves of a whole, like they're one gestalt entity. And it takes us back, obviously, to that line from Powers of X #2, there is no you and I, there is only us. Like, it's seeming more and more literal that there is no Xavier and Magneto anymore, there is only them.
Is it, oh, hang on, sorry, just because, is it the italics is because he's saying it to the mind versus...
It's been, sometimes it's for emphasis, sometimes it seems like it might be, I don't know. They've used them in different ways. It'll be interesting to see what gets revealed.
Sorry. All right.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing for me that felt a little bit off was, I mean, that is true for all saviors seen here in Hotspots so far. He is really condescending. Like the way he's talking to his X-Men is really condescending. He's like talking down to them. It feels really weird to me. And then the second thing that sort of stood out for me was like, oh, Cyclops said, oh yeah, they understood the stakes and the risk, and then he passed through the gate and he starts explaining what they're going to do. So I'm like, wait, I thought they understood the stakes and the risk. So why does he have to explain the whole thing again immediately after he passed through the gate?
Because he lied.
No, maybe because that's not what he said. That's not what he, someone put those words in him. I thought that was more...
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you all really covered it, and we're talking about 2 pages at this point before we get into the team being assembled. But there's, I think we need to separate out. A lot of people on the web are talking about whenever you bring up somebody being off voice, they're like, well, they could be pod people, because people are really still thinking about that first scene in the first issue with the dancing Xavier and all the people coming out of the pods. And I think that if you're going to assign the pod people explanation for why stuff is coming off so weird, this is the scene to assign it to. Because I think anytime that we're like directly in Xavier's company, it's clear that there's something fishy going on. So I make no complaints about voicing in the scene. I think if anything, it's incredibly consistent to the totally bizarre way that Xavier and Magneto have been behaving all of this time. And I the other thing that I'll say before we move on to talking about the team that Cyclops assembles is I do enjoy that this scene really nods to recent continuity in a way that the rest of HoXPoX has not really done yet. So we have Magneto referring to Cyclops as the leader of a nation. That's one of the first explicit nods to the continuity of the last 7 or 8 years that we've had in any of the text in these 6 issues, because it refers to Cyclops taking control of the mutant race after Messiah Complex and founding Utopia, and then also kind of nods at Cyclops, the revolutionary.
A lot of people have said that, and I would like to believe, as a continuity nerd, that that's true. I am not convinced that it is. I think that Hickman is actually doing something else here, and I'm not sure that this is actually a reference to the Utopia Nation X stuff. I think that in this scene, Hickman is really hammering home his religious allegory that he's been setting up here. I think, and in fact, I see something specifically biblical at work. Oh, I guess that means it's time.
I think it might be time.
It's time
From mutant genesis to the age of apocalypse, he's got the knowledge you ordered. So sit right back for an X-Men sermon. It's Zach's Biblical Corner. It's Zach's Biblical Corner. He's read it all.
Thank you, Peter. So,
lyrics by Zach, by the way. That was a collaboration. Once I told him he was going to have a theme song, he was like, "Well, then I'm gonna have to take."
I just might have these lyrics to a theme song that I keep on my computer in case it ever comes up.
Yeah.
So
please continue.
We've seen Hickman before set up Xavier and Magneto, each in their own way, as god figures in this new nation of Krakoa. I think that he is making a very specific point here to set up Cyclops as prophet to Xavier and Magneto as dual gods, and really 2 different types of gods. I think it's really interesting that if we look at their dialogue here, Xavier is really preaching salvation to Cyclops and his team through faith in their mission, and Magneto explicitly preaches salvation through works. He says that they will be made immortal by their mighty works. This is a really deliberate contrast that he's setting up. And I would also say that when we talk about works, it's taking us back to this comparison of Magneto to Nimrod. Nimrod in the Bible tries to gain immortality through his mighty work of building this Tower of Babel, and is eventually punished for it. And I think it's also, this is not biblical, but I think it's also supposed to make us think of Shelley's poem Ozymandias, "Look upon my works, ye mighty, in despair." And it's supposed to be a deliberately ironic statement.
So you think the nation that Magneto's referring to is the present nation of Krakoa?
I think he is talking
because
very specifically about Krakoa. He's talking about Cyclops as the prophet founder of Krakoa. And I would say that in this context, it's possible that he is thinking here of specifically Moses as prophet. And I say that because traditionally, according to Jewish tradition and in the Passover Haggadah, you don't say Moses' name. The name only appears once in that entire ceremony. You don't say it because it's considered destructive to remember a human in that way, in a way that might become worshipful and destructive to the people who are a part of that new nation. So I think that Cyclops here is sort of ironically being set up as the prophet of a new nation who is going to be forgotten.
Whoa. Well, that was certainly worthy of the theme song.
Yeah, absolutely. And before that, he said like it will be 30-second. I'm like, no, no.
I don't know.
Yeah,
much
I
about
believe
what'll
his
stop
words
this
were.
episode.
I believe Zach's words were the theme song could be longer than the thing that I have to say.
Yeah.
I may have come up with some of that material on the fly.
Oh my god.
So before we moved on to the next scene, I just want to point out something which I thought is kind of maybe something. Have you guys noticed that every X-Men have their forehead covered except for 2?
Well, let's roll tape. Do they all have their forehead covered? Let's take a look. Wolverine, yes. Husk, sure. Archangel, yes. Monet with bangs. Jean, much to my annoyance, yes. Kurt, yes. Mystique has her little skull thing that she always has. So yeah, I think
I'm going
that
to say
holds up.
technically yes, although a lot of these people have it ostensibly covered by their haircuts, which seems like an iffy way to cover your forehead if disguise is the effect that you're after.
Yep.
Tyler, would you say there's something sinister about that?
Well, look at the title for for the next issue.
I can't. It's in Krakoan. I have no idea.
Zach had it with this issue.
All right, next scene.
What is it? What is it? What is the title for subtitle?
You don't know it?
No, I didn't. Because
We rely on you for these answers, Tyler.
That's what we're here for, Zach. And like Tyler.
Something sinister.
Something sinister?
Yeah.
That's what it is? Oh.
So
wow.
the next issue is It Will Be Done, and then the one after is Something Sinister.
And Mr. Sinister is looming large on an upcoming cover. Freya, so now that we've looked at our away team here, do you know all these characters as somebody who is not a newer necessarily, but has read some specific X-Men? Who are you acquainted with here and who are you not?
Well, I know all the ones that showed up in the movies. So
Okay.
So pretty much the lady next to Wolverine and the other lady on the either side of Angel. I don't know them, but
you've read Wolverine and the X-Men by Aaron, right?
yeah. Well, no, hang on, hold up. You were assuming I remember these things.
Okay, well, we're gonna help. So the blonde lady next to Wolverine is Husk, who was one of the teachers, sort of coaches in Wolverine and the X-Men, who is enthralled with Toad for reasons that remain inexplicable. Jason Aaron,
one of the 87.4 Guthrie siblings.
Yeah, they just
true. Okay. Yeah, that's why I didn't care for her because she cared for Toad.
No,
that's why.
And I mean, I asked that question too. So, but when you look at close up of her later on, you see tears on her skin.
I didn't even notice that, I don't think.
Yeah, there is.
Oh, yeah, I see it.
What makes her a better pick than Colossus? If we're talking about Cyclops and strategy, I don't know. Zach, you've read Generation X most recently. Why is Paige a good pick for a suicide mission to the sun?
I don't know. And I don't know if we're going to learn in future issues that there was any rationale to this team beyond Hickman likes them, because I wouldn't put that past him as a possibility here. And I don't know. I mean, considering how we know this mission is going to end up, maybe the rationale for all of these guys is they were expendable.
Yes, I was just gonna say that. That's what I thought. Well, except for maybe a lot of them. Because
maybe this is but maybe this is Cyclops' dirty dozen.
Exactly. I was saying that other than the core team that you see every X-Men franchises and stuff, the other two I thought that they were just cannon fodder. That's what I took them as, because I don't know.
I mean, Jean will be fine because she'll just turn into an immortal Firebird and come back. But everybody else is expendable.
Yeah, and Wolverine will get regenerated from a drop of blood or something.
Right.
Yeah. And
then at some point, yeah, that's what I thought. I don't know.
I mean, the comparison to Colossus would be not a fair comparison. I mean, we'll sort of debunk my theory. But I was thinking that, Husk could basically peel off and become something that could withstand the vacuum of space.
Interesting.
And then Monet, I'm really happy to be introducing Freya to Monet because she is one of my all-time favorites and high in sass. Mm-hmm. She's a really interesting history, probably deeper than we can get into here, but she's a little bit of a tank. She's a little bit of a psychic. She's a total perfectionist. She's kind of like, if anybody watches The Good Place, she's kind of what is the woman's name? Nobody, Zach. I know you watched The Good Place.
I know, but I'm too tired.
I can't think of her name. Anyway, she's that character as a superhero. She always thinks she's right. She's got all of the rich and famous friends.
I know. Jamila is the actor's name.
I keep thinking of the actress's name.
Yeah, but anyway, so it's she's like her. Okay, interesting. I would like to see more of her.
Tahani Al-Jamil is her name.
If she doesn't die. But anyway, I would like to see more of her if she doesn't.
She's
die.
great. Monet used very well in. Oh, what's that, Tyler?
M can also fly, and she's also a little bit invulnerable.
Yes, I think she's a better pick than say like Psylocke because she just has a little bit more durability, Swiss Army knife aspect to her. She's great in the 2013 X-Men run, great in Cullen Bunn's Uncanny X-Men, great in Christina Strange Generation X, one of the best X-Men titles of the past decade. So lots of good places to get some Monet.
Right.
So final thoughts on To Me, My X-Men, Freya?
Well, no, I said that you had a problem with how Jean Grey is voiced over here, right?
Well,
the next one, right? The next few pages.
So look, we just came off of Jean being the ostensible leader of the mutant race, right? There's no Cyclops, no Xavier, no Wolverine. She's and Storm is like, I'm done. Jean rounds out that top 5 for me. And then Kitty is like the honorable mention alternate on the team who gets called up, right? So we just came off from Jean being the leader of the race. She just did this global throwdown with Cassandra Nova, if all of that turns out to be in continuity with reading her. And here she's kind of like, but we're not going to kill anybody, right? Like and she's like in this costume that she wore to get killed on the moon to go get killed at the sun. Like, I mean, I know there's foreshadowing on Hickman's part, but I'm like, really, girl, you're going to let your ass be hanging out of that 60s go-go skirt for one of the most important missions in the history of mutant kind? So I kind of am like, why is Jean... I don't know. Jean is the reason I came back to reading comics in 2010. So if there's any character that I start to like lose rationality a little bit, I can disclaim that it's Jean Grey. And then also like on the Blackbird Wolverine, we get political Wolverine who Hickman knows and loves because Wolverine was political in Secret Wars 1984. And he says, great line that we hear on Twitter a lot about the real world right now. Innocent civilians don't build machines to exterminate a species, Slim, which is not too different than some of the dialogue about, you are who you elect. And, I think that I felt like Jean and Cyclops should have been having that argument to me. Like, I don't know. Anybody stop me from rambling, please.
No, I'd have let Jean's costume slide if they had put Cyclops in his Eric the Red outfit. That's the only way. If Cyclops had decided, you know what I'm going to wear on this mission? I'm going with the leather Viking bondage outfit. That's what we're going to do when we go fight in space.
Priya, do you know that reference?
Which one? Which reference are you talking about? Right. No.
You have no idea what we're talking about.
I'll see if I can find some delicious.
No, I mean,
we can Google an Eric the Red image. All right, at some point in this episode, let's see if we can pull up an Eric the Red image for our viewers to feast on.
No, so the thing is, like, because you pointed out about Jean Grey. I'll be honest with you. I think it's at this point Peter will just storm off from this, from my life altogether. Probably, I really don't care for Jean Grey. Like, I never cared for her in the movies. That she was like pretty much one of the reasons that I always think X-Men to be the mopey people that they are, because like, oh my God, just stop moping. And her and Cyclops always. I didn't care for her in New X-Men. My disappointment over here was that I thought Hickman will change my mind. And he didn't. It's still the same Jean Grey. That's what I'm also agreeing with you, but for different reason.
I mean, I think it's not just Jean. Like, I agree with you, Peter, that Jean is off here and she is not being written up to the level of activism and agency that we were seeing in especially recent continuity.
And in Morrison's X-Men, but please continue.
But I would say that this entire scene overall is an example of accidental bad dialogue. I think that virtually everyone here is just speaking in incredibly flat, functional words that move the plot forward exactly as much as Hickman needs to in this scene. Nobody has personality. Nobody sounds like they're having fun. So it's not fun to read them.
Yeah, I even felt like Angel and Husk were like... I feel like
there's
Angel
a
and
way to
Husk were,
write
like,
these things in ways that's entertaining, and he's not even trying to entertain. He's just having like, what do I need these people to say to convey the facts to the reader of what they're about to do? All right, we're done. Let's move on to a chart because I love charts.
Hey, I'm gonna say though, I thought that. I'm gonna say though that Jean Grey is boring to me, and she was boring. Wolverine is like always like, "Hey, we're gonna to do this. I don't care for anyone." He was like that over here, and who else talked? But anyway.
Yeah, well, I do think we have to move past this because we're now past the half-hour mark and we're stuck in these first few pages.
We've gotten through 4 pages so far.
So I'll just say just the thing I was saying, and I should not have been talking over, is that like even Paige and Angel, who get 1 line each, it's like they're swapped. Like Angel's like, I don't get it, why no plants? And then Paige is like, tactfully, yeah, call me crazy. It seems like a good idea. Like that. You would think Paige would be the one who would be like, I don't get it, no plants. But anyway, that's just me. So let me see what we're up to next. So they take off, and then we get some chart pages, and I don't want to linger too long on the chart pages because they're a little bit more declarative in this issue than revelationary. But the one really interesting one is there's this chart page all in black that basically ties together a number of Moira lives in a sequential way that we haven't really seen any of the text do yet. And it starts with the idea that a Nimrod is an end state. And Moira has learned that while AI is unavoidable, Nimrod is not necessarily unavoidable. And then it tracks through her 9th life of the apocalypse, all the things we saw last week, and that she, works with Xavier with a number of technopaths to try to avoid this. But I think there's 2 big questions here. One is, how does she know that Nimrod is not unavoidable? What past life does that information come from? And my second question is, what technopaths and what is this sleeping giant system? How far back does that exist?
Good question, Peter. Zach?
Well, I think those are exactly the right questions. And I think that Tyler has what probably most people are going to go to as the instinctive guess, which is, did Moira see something in her as yet invisible life 6 that clued her off that the direction of Nimrod is not inevitable? I would say probably yes. I would say, given the indications that we've seen so far, that would have to be the most likely candidate, because she seems, the way this chart is presented, that is given to us as information that she knows going into life 9.
Tyler, further thoughts?
Well, I think I mean, obviously, I believe it's 6 because I think that's the only life that we did not see, and all the lives that she had lived through when she died. Well, except for life 4, which is very similar to 616. So she might have encountered a Nimrod that came back in time, which is slightly different from. Which probably may not inform her that that is the end point.
Right. Like that almost would confirm that Nimrod seems to be unavoidable. It seems like all of her like mutant-y lives either get stopped by something Nimrod-esque or she dies before she would know. So it seems like there's one life where she must realize that he's not unavoidable. And it comes before all of the text about life number 9. So I don't think we're supposed to take it as read that she figures that out based on the data files from life 9. I think it's that she knew that already, and that's why they had the mission that they had in life number 9. So it seems like it's gotta be 6. I guess it could be 7 when she assassinates all the people, but she gets killed by the wild mother mold in that one. So I think it's gotta be 6.
And it also suggests, I think really importantly, that the point of this mission is not necessarily to destroy or stop Nimrod, it's to change Nimrod. It's to try and it's to aim Nimrod in a direction such that it's not going to be destructively targeted against the mutant race. And, for those of us who have been theorizing that Moira's consciousness is going to be put into the mother mold, this goes to that. And I think this might be the point, the time to draw everyone's attention again to Moira's statement back when we first learned about her repeating lives that mother is safety, mother is home. She seems to use the word mother a lot for somebody who might be put into a mother mold. So let's just put that out there.
I mean, on the point of sleeping giant, I mean, my first thought would be Forge, but
for sure.
Yeah. But the other thing also is that, while the next scene, we will know, not the next scene, the one after, where Kurt does not know Karima is on Orchis on the Forge. Is she one of the?
Is Karima a plant? Is a possibility that I think is still out there.
Yeah.
So, Freya, the next scene is with a fan favorite character both here on the show and in the internet at large. What did you think about everybody's favorite boss ass bitch, Emma Frost?
I loved it. That's like one thing I loved. I loved it. I loved it so much. Like, you know, especially like I was kind of feeling weird about like, I don't care for Sabretooth that much. I know he has some weird history about how, you know, rapes and everything.
He's kind of, yeah,
I don't care for him. But Emma's here to make everything okay. As much as I don't like Jean, I love Emma. And, you know, the way that she just, like, entered with that flowing cape with the sunglass. I want that sunglass. And
I'm sorry, entered with a flowing cape and sunglasses beneath a cross of gold. Can we draw attention to this?
I have to get the ukulele back?
I'm sorry. Well, look, drawn in a way that makes it look like she's walking through a church underneath a cross. I mean, this is ridiculous. This is Emma as mutant messiah. It is an unbelievable panel.
I mean, and the thing is, I want to cosplay as that because I feel like that's easily doable. You know, you get a white lingerie on top of like a white cape, and then with the gold cross and everything. I mean, I just loved it. I loved everything about it, and then the sunglass that she's wearing sunglass indoor.
And the giant Flava Flav sized X that's just in the middle of her chest. Like she's like, I'm not gonna put it on the garment, folks. Let's really just keep the garment nice and clean lines.
Right. And then when she said, I know Sabe, he's a monster, but he's our monster. I'm like, yes. This is one part I really genuinely loved. And what's it, like, you know, I loved it. So yeah.
Zach, any further comments other than the clear religiosity of her entrance here?
I think the only other thing that I noticed was her line, there's quite a difference between what's getting ready to happen and what it really means, which felt like Hickman's mission statement for the writing of Jonathan Hickman. And I do think it suggests that whatever it looks like Emma is doing there in that scene isn't what's really going on. So I think that everyone should probably make a mental note of that scene, because I think that was a little bit of sleight of hand. Whatever, it may be a parallel with the sort of distraction mission that the X2 X-Men were pulling off in that last Powers of 10. But I think that this was a little bit of distracting us from the actual thing that was happening.
Sorry, Tyler, go.
I mean, I kind of like the scene. Is sort of, I mean, it is Emma to me. I know Peter disagree a little bit. Well, not a little bit, a lot, but it feels kind of like her. But there's one thing I want to point out is that it is the use of all these data pages. It was really good in the first couple of issues. But in this issue, I think it's getting really old. There is a point where it goes from something really special to something really gimmicky. You know, like, for example, the whole thing about what do they call this? Achilles, Project Achilles. Is there a need for that page? Because the following page with just I think 2 captions. It kind of explains it. I don't really need that data page, which is also like half white anyway, to break it up, especially when this is like the 3rd data dump page. And I mean, I'd rather have another page of art than this.
Especially because, I mean, who knows if that's a trade-off that we could have even had, because the artists are working so hard. I mean, let's just pause and appreciate this. Lara's kills the fashion here. Like, people who just use the same thing for Emma over and over again and put her in like a bustier are like missing the whole point of Emma Frost. And somebody pointed out, like, dressed weather appropriate. Like, she still shows skin, but she's in this like sumptuous what is it, like a cloak sort of. I stopped and gasped out loud. It's such a good panel. It's so good. But anyway,
I just want that lipstick. What is that color? I want that. I want to show up in another episode with that sunglass and that. I just love it. One thing I just do want to point out though, that these are the Stafford cuckoos, right?
Yes, two of them.
They follow her everywhere. I just love that thing, but it's totally cool if you leave the chains on. I just really laughed out loud at that. That was really cool. But one of the things that at the very end, Emma says, "It's a brave new world, darlings. Best get used to it." It's a brave new world, darlings. It's in italics, the same italics that Professor X talks.
Could just be emphasis, but it's interesting how it keeps happening while we're hanging out with all of our psychic friends.
Right. So the thing is, like, I just thought that was an interesting thing, and I don't know why this wasn't at the front of the issue. Like, I know that he's trying to do Professor X Magneto in every issue, but this line should have been the front of the issue.
Oh, the opening line. I actually wondered if this scene really was originally supposed to be in Powers of X or Powers of 10 too, and it got moved because Emma and Sabretooth were on that cover, like really big. Ooh. And that's the only cover that hasn't been like super literal. All the covers have been almost like spoiler levels of literal so far. And so it makes me wonder if maybe there was some reshuffling, but the reason I would say possibly not is because like that would have indicated that Silva was going to draw this at some point, and clearly Silva was never going to draw this scene. So like maybe just, I don't know, it just seems super weird that there was a cover with Emma and Sabretooth huge on it.
And that Powers of 10 issue had such a specific momentum. Like, I can't think of where they could possibly have put that scene that wouldn't have broken it completely.
But who knows? Maybe even at like the outline stage. You never know. But so look, you've all alluded to that I've had some complaints about this. I think Hickman actually really gets the spirit of Emma really, really well, and that was fun to see. I feel like Emma, she's a certain way that she speaks where the put downs have to do with how much better than you she is. And I feel like if you look at the 3 or 4 times that she really like twists the knife here, it's almost like linguistic play, which is not as much of an Emma. I mean, she's super, super smart and she does play with language, but all of them felt like more like her toying with words than her toying with like people's emotions and insecurities. The closest we get is when she basically tells the one person, you can stick the gun where the sun don't shine. But even the way that she says it is like almost this like weird ambiguous thing. So it kind of really annoyed me in the moment. I've seen a lot of people be like, no, it totally felt like Emma. And I think we're like catching 2 different things. I think Hickman nailed how haughty she is, how she just does not care about anybody else's opinion. She's on her own mission. I just think that I'm hoping he's going to write her more because she's supposedly one of his 5 favorite X-Men. And I think that she has more of a specific voice. It'll be really interesting to see how Dugan writes her on the Marauders books. I don't think Dugan has wrote Emma before other than like a panel or 2. And I love Emma Frost. All right.
I mean, yeah, go.
No, please. I was going to say final thoughts on this courtroom scene.
No, I mean, to me, I thought she was okay. Like, you know, this is the Emma, I know. But then again, I only know Emma from New X-Men and then that one shot of Leah Williams.
Yes.
And another Emma Frost thing I've read somewhere. But yeah, that's pretty much it. But to me, I thought like she was just in, get the thing done, out of here. And then in between, she just like, you know, smacked some people, like, you know, figuratively. That's all I got from it. But anyway.
Fun Emma Frost.
She made a bunch of people puke from the word asparagus or something.
Yeah, like she likes almost like really taking people's dignity away and like emasculating people a lot. That's fun fact in art that I've actually, maybe Claremont said this when I met him and I heard him do a talk, that Emma used to be drawn much more masculine. If you look at her features, like her cheekbones, her eyebrows, like her face almost had like a somewhat masculine feature to it. And that was part of how they kind of communicated how like forceful and kind of terrifying she could be, even though she was in this clearly very like sexy cheesecake body a lot of the times. And I feel like she's like almost too pretty sometimes and not as severe. And I mean, I love her, and there's not a critique of Laura's drawing her. I think it's brilliant, but I just thought that was an interesting fact about Emma that a lot of people don't notice. If you go back to like early, like John Byrne, Dave Cockrum Emma, she's drawn with much more masculine features.
But I don't agree with that.
No,
I don't agree with that. Like, because you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do like, you know, just because a woman is like all tough, she now needs to look masculine.
No, I don't. I think that was kind of like a shorthand signal, and maybe to your point, the art is a lot more subtle now, and you don't have to like give her like manly cheekbones in order to, in order to make it out that she's tough. I just always think that that's interesting to go back and look at.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay.
Are we going to talk about this chart? Does anybody have strong feelings about this chart? There's a chart. It's about the Omega cycle.
I think that chart is going to turn out to be very important. I think that it is impossible to say with any certainty based on what we know now that it is important or how it is important, but I think it will come back later in the series.
And so this is the first time they ever mentioned how Omega Sentinels are made?
I think in this depth, it's the first time, but the process in basic outline actually goes back to the 90s. It goes back to the Operation Zero Tolerance crossover way, way back in the day. So this is not something new that Hickman is inventing.
Okay. Well, in that case, let's move on.
Okay. So I think we can pretty much take all of the rest of it as one big scene, which is that the X-Men are approaching the station that's in orbit around the sun. The station notices them approaching, but their backup Sentinels are too far away to get there. They're on like Jupiter or something. Nightcrawler ports in, does some reconnaissance, and encounters Omega Sentinel, and then ultimately one of the humans basically blows the hatch that the X-Men are starting to make and potentially explodes the entire Blackbird, leaving us with our cliffhanger. So, Freya, it's an awful lot of stuff. It's a lot of our humans. It's a lot of action, a lot of fun with Nightcrawler. What were your feelings about this whole heist sort of break-in sequence?
And this is exactly where my single issue fatigue just dawned on me, because I need to know now what happens next. To me, I don't think a lot of things happen. I mean, things exploded. Someone a lot of things happen in the sense people there's an explosion happening. Someone said like, oh, don't let this muties win, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, oh, hurrah. What's next? Now I have to wait a week to find out. And I don't know, to me that, because I need instant gratification about action scenes, because I feel like I need to know exactly what was the consequences of that. I don't know that. So to me, it's just a lot of things just happened. Without knowing the next, I can't comment on this.
So, was it fun? Did you like it?
Sure. I mean, sure. I know. That's what I'm saying. What was the point? Did you win? Did you lose? Who won? What's the reaction to this? I need to know that before I can judge this.
So what you're saying essentially is, Marvel, if you're listening, send me preview issues.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. Thank you, Tyler. We practiced this before. Thank you, Tyler.
She's very trustworthy. She's not going to send any spoilers out. She's just going to mock us.
Yeah. Yeah. That's all I'm going to be using it for. Mocking people. So yeah.
Much like Emma Frost. That's why.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, Zach, you're saying.
So. I have a lot of interesting things that I noticed specifically in the opening conversation between Dr. Gregor and Karima, more than the heist itself. And it's a bunch of little continuity things. And you know that the first and only love of my life is old X-Men continuity. So this is what I seized on. So there's a point in their conversation when Dr. Gregor says to Karima, I'm looking at the line here, this is why the Forge was built with these control collars. If things go south, Omega, so does she, referring to Mother Mold, right into the heart of the sun. That's not an accidental phrase. That's a phrase that points us way, way back to the original X-Men number 59, part of the Sentinels return plot, in which Cyclops and the X-Men defeat the Sentinels by convincing them that the sun is the source of all mutation. Therefore, in order to stop mutation, they must fly, in his words, into the heart of the sun to attempt to destroy it and therefore stop mutants from occurring. And on the page before Dr. Gregor says that, she even uses the phrase, or Karima uses the phrase, after all, they know where mutants come from. So this is Hickman drawing us back to that issue. If you follow that plot line to the next time we see those Sentinels who had flown into the heart of the sun, we find them in an issue of Roy Thomas Avengers, issue 104 specifically. where the Sentinels come back, and one of them has in fact become a mutant because of his exposure to the sun's radiation, prompting the other Sentinels to have to destroy him. So Tyler, a few episodes ago, you brought forward a theory about mutant machines. This is Hickman telling us specifically to go back and look at issues about mutant machines. And that made me think of another continuity reference, one that was hammering at the back of my head last issue, but I couldn't quite think of it. And now I remember. Back in the last Powers of 10, we heard Nimrod talking about inconsistency in the mutants, the inconsistency of their action. I knew that I had heard that somewhere before, and now I remember where it was. It's from the very last appearance of classic Nimrod in the 616 universe in Uncanny X-Men 247. That's when Nimrod...
Ooh, that's a very key issue.
Yeah. And it's when Nimrod merged with Master Mold, discovers that he himself is exhibiting, in his words, inconsistency. His behavior is no longer consistent, and he realizes that he is becoming a mutant. He's showing signs of life and becoming a mutant, and his ultimate decision is to self-destruct and commit suicide just before Rogue shoves him through the Siege Perilous portal. But that's another example of a Sentinel machine developing mutation and changing the direction of their intelligence because of that mutation. That's two very clear references that Hickman is giving us here. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think way back, well, not way, but like in House of X1, I think, or Powers of X1, I think it, in the very last scene, in the X to the power 3 scene, I think the librarian said something like, they didn't. I mean, the war ended in a manner that no one thought would happen, and that sort of prompted me to think in terms of like maybe it's not a war between humans and mutants, but between machines and mutant machines.
I think that given what we're hearing here, I think that is a really distinct possibility. And I also noticed that they mentioned on a couple of occasions here, Mother Mold sleeping. Mm-hmm. And we've heard in a couple of past issues, people asserting that machines don't dream. We've heard that more than once. I would posit that this is perhaps not as true as everybody keeps saying it is.
Yeah.
Nimrod didn't seem sure of it last issue. There's a machine sleeping right now. I think that machine might be dreaming more than everyone seems to think it is.
I mean, the other thing I thought was quite interesting was also Karima saying, after all, they know where mutants come from. And she doesn't identify with them. Like, she doesn't identify with the machines. She doesn't identify with Mother Mole or Master Mole. She refers to them as something.
Right, they're the they. Yeah.
That's a really good point. Karima sort of positioning herself here and being positioned here as standing between two worlds. She's really neither human, mutant, nor machine.
Yep.
It's a really good point.
Yeah, and we certainly have had that Between Two Worlds theme already teased on the tarot cards.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, Peter, what's your reaction? Because I have a couple of questions that I want to ask.
Sure. I mean, I enjoyed it. I think that ultimately I tend to get a little bit less into the continuity connection stuff on my first pass, and I'm more in the like, is this page being used efficiently? And I just think, especially when you have Lara's drawing, it was just like a little bit much of like static scenes showing us the inside of the space station. I don't even feel like they were giving us a specific geography of the station that we're going to get to refer to in the next issue that's going to make it seem like, oh, good thing I know what that room looked like. So it kind of just felt like a lot. I felt like similar to how I did last issue, where maybe the emphasis was in the wrong place a little bit. But I do think the sequence with Nightcrawler was really fun. I think that his encounter with Karima was memorable, maybe one of the most memorable character encounters that we've had so far. And that was the second point, I think, in the issue, where the artwork just took my breath away. I'm trying to find the page where Nightcrawler's face is in shadow and he kind of greets her. And it's a small panel, But I just think that it was stunning, and it really like got me caught there in the moment, which is what you want. So, I mean, I think it was fine. I think ultimately we've yet to see all the things these characters are going to get up to on this mission, or not. Maybe they've all been blown up and they're dead. So, you know, I think given the cover, I was kind of hoping to see them a little bit more in action, but I do think Nightcrawler was used well.
Yeah, this is the panel you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, this just so good. The shadow on his face, because Nightcrawler's one of his abilities, let's recall, canonically, is that he does blend into shadows and is hard to see. So just like him kind of emerging from the black there, really, really.
That's
cool.
almost Gene Colan-esque right there.
It is. It's like a painting with pencils kind of thing, which is a very Colan kind of technique. Possibly my favorite Marvel Silver and Bronze Age artist, actually.
Right. So in essence of time, I just want to very quickly ask a couple of questions. Though.
Sure, go. Lightning round.
Lightning round. Karima, is that the same lady who was hanging out with Nimrod in Powers of 10?
We don't know. That character was called Omega Sentinel, and it was never actually made clear whether that's this Omega Sentinel, Karima, or if it's a completely different character. It really could be either one.
So Karima is not a new character.
Karima goes back to Chris Claremont's return to the title, I think around 2000. It was shortly after Zero Tolerance she got introduced.
Right.
Yeah, and then Carrie uses her very frequently in his run as well.
Right. Because I'm trying to compare, like, you know, they look similar, but then I was like, oh, is that dissimilarity because of Silva versus Perez, or is it like, you know, because these are two different characters? I couldn't figure that out. So that was like one of my questions, like, who is this? And then the doctor lady she was talking to, is she important? Like, you know, is she a new character, old character?
Dr. Gregor, we only met her for the first time back in House of X #1.
Yeah, I think all the human characters are new, I think.
Because, you know, it seems like she's having like she has a boyfriend / husband who is very anti-mutant and killed himself over a mutant, like, you know, that do not let them take us or something like that, making high proclamation.
Well, I think I want to pause there for a second, because that was really interesting that I didn't get the sense in the first issue that these were people that were like, I don't know, radicalized against mutants. Like, I kind of got the sense that, like, well, this is the mission we've got to do for the good of humanity. And then in this issue, I got way more the sense that he was much more radicalized in a way that we would typically see an X-Men opponent. And I think that's interesting, and that might come into play a little bit in terms of what's going on with Orchis or what they encounter in the next issue, that some of them are people who are kind of just doing their job, quote unquote, and then some of them are people who are really radicalized. But to Wolverine's point earlier in the Blackbird, anybody who's working on the machine of mutants extinction is somebody who's working against the mutants, regardless of how radicalized they are.
But to Tyler's point, though, it also kind of brings up, because he said, don't let them win. Are we sure them is the mutant he's talking about? Them is the machine? Like, you know, because there's now, seems like 3 points, like, of 3 different of, like, you know.
No, but at this point in time, it's only mutants and humans. The machines have not ascended yet.
Right. Dr. Gregor seems to be exhibiting some doubts that maybe unleashing these machines might be the disaster that it turns into every damn time the humans release these machines to try to defeat the mutants. But Erasmus seems to be totally unaware of every previous X-Men Sentinel plot, so he's just all in on this mission.
Sorry, I think I jumped off for a little while, as it's like the new, like, you know, the way it is.
Oh, that's all right. I was just throwing some shade on the repetitiveness of this plot.
Right. And but the thing is, like, and also, what was the whole point of having that Sentinel head, like, you know, connected to that? Is that illusion? Like, is it alluding to something?
That is Mother Mold. Yeah,
that's the Mother Mold structure that they've built, the robot to make other robots that makes other robots.
Is it where is the head? What is the origin of the head? Is it the head of the Master Mold from Morrison? I feel like we talked about this in Powers of X1, and it's so long ago that I don't remember.
I know this is certainly the single issue effect. I'm realizing now that I think he did establish that, and I cannot tell you off the top of my head where that head comes from.
Okay, so I'll look into it.
That was my question. That is this an important Sentinel? Because it looks like just any other Sentinel. So what is the significance of it? That's why I was asking my experts that question.
I'm gonna go with maybe.
Well, I mean, it definitely references. I mean, it's definitely meant to, I think, reference something that wasn't newly created, that is like picked up from something, or I mean, that's how I read it from way back in issue 1. That this has ties to Morrison's run, and but then it's not the same one because they're converting it into a mother mold, which creates more master molds. So I think that's how I read it.
The only reason I bring it up, as an engineer, it killed me.
Are you trying to engineer a Sentinel? Don't do that. Take anything from the series. Don't do that.
I'm not trying to. I'm just saying that how you build a plan, I mean, that's not the way you do it. Like,
you're totally going to build a Sentinel now. I can just feel it.
No, I can't. I'm never going to do. I am all about mutants, yo. But what I'm saying is, like, if you are trying to build a plan, your major thing is completely unprotected from weather and outside element. I did not care for that. That's all I'm trying to say. But anyway, that is my contribution to this episode. I am done.
So just to call back to the director's cut of issue number 1, first of all, it does not specify that it's a specific Master Mold Mother Mold. It just says the giant face of a Master Mold Mother Mold rests at the dead center of the forge. The other thing is, I think a small detail we forgot, but this is Hickman's version of characterization, is the doctor lady took off her spacesuit before they had confirmed that the environmental controls are working correctly in the first issue, and Dr. Aramis, the radicalized one, says, "This is why we don't have kids." And then in this episode, he's also berating her for not having children.
Yeah.
So screw him.
So this is just to give a little shout out to our friends at Hoxpox Talks, who have been fantastic conversation partners and brilliant scholars of this series in their own right. They observed that that character Erasmus is very likely a reference to Erasmus Darwin, who was a member of the Darwin family and an evolutionary biologist. So the human scientists on that base are being named after geneticists.
Was he the dumb one? Like, he wasn't Charles Darwin, so
no, he was a later generation. He was quite an important and brilliant evolutionary biologist. But the point is that they're all
Darwin
in the same way that Gregor Mendel was a famous geneticist. These characters are being named after famous scientists in genetics or evolution.
Okay.
I would also point out that alternatively, he could be named after the Renaissance Catholic humanist scholar Desiderius Erasmus, who argued with Luther, saying that man is saved through works and not just faith. And that takes us back to the argument between works and faith that we saw from Magneto and Xavier in scene 1. So yes, little mini theme song there because it's a possible religious reference.
What about
Corner?
the line about evolving past Heller-Faust Line?
Yeah, so you found a really interesting possibility. You want to talk about that, Tyler?
Well, I mean, what I found was mostly there's these 2 ladies who work at Google AI, specializing in machine intelligence, and their last name is Heller and Faust.
So Hickman has this line about the machines evolving past the Heller-Faust line, which does not appear to be a real thing. It's something that seems to be made up for this issue. So I think that you have very likely landed on his little homage to these 2 Google scholars for that term. So I'm very impressed by that.
Now take that back about what you said about Hickman and Lee's. Like,
no, but then the other thing is this.
The most active women in a Hickman comic don't even appear in the comic. They work at Google.
I mean, this is not Unstoppable Wasp. We don't have Girl Labs in the back with interviews here. We're talking about a one-line reference that you have to be Tyler to catch.
But what I want to point out is that the line is set in the context of the machine evolving into a potential sociopath. And I think that is actually closer to what Zach found.
So I thought that what I landed on before you found all of this, I actually thought was a little bit of a reach, but maybe. There was a German scholar at the beginning of the 20th century named Otto Heller, who wrote about a number of things, but one of them was a work about Faust as described by Goethe and Marlowe, the 2 famous Renaissance poets who had each done a play about Faust. And Faust is, of course, a character in literature who sells his soul to the devil in order to gain infinite knowledge. So it's possible that this was also a reference to that scholar Heller, and the machines are effectively making a deal with the devil to gain enough knowledge to become sentient. So 2 possibilities here for what Hickman is doing.
So, go first.
Sorry.
No, go first.
I was going to say that, like, this whole part, this last part of it, I kind of enjoyed it for the most part. But there is one scene, I mean, the Nightcrawler potting blind really annoys me.
All right, let's get nerdy, because Zach and I both also noticed this and we're talking about it together. So, historically, Nightcrawler needs to have an idea of where he's going in order to port there, so he doesn't port into like a wall or something. He doesn't have like a natural bumper car protection against these things in the way that's, I think magic doesn't tend to port in the middle of mountains. I don't know. But the other thing is, Zach, were you the one that pointing out about the velocity?
It was Tyler. It was Tyler who pointed that out. And it's a really interesting
talk about
point.
the velocity, because I think this is a really good point that is worth talking about.
Yeah. No, I was thinking, I mean, the other thing that has always been established is that the momentum that Nightcrawler has is carried through the port. Like when he teleports while he's running, he would appear with the same momentum. So right now we are, he's on the plane that's approaching the station, right? So the plane is moving really fast. So when he ports into, well, assuming he ports blind, whatever, he's lucky and doesn't like materialize into something or someone, he's going to have the momentum of the station exiting the, at the other end. And he's going to like slam right into the wall and go splat.
Which would have been a fantastic Nightcrawler death scene if Hickman was going to write one.
Right? I mean, the other thing also is this, right? Hickman also mentioned, I mean, in the writing, it's established that I think the station is in Joe's stationary with Mercury, right? With respect, so it's actually rotating around the sun as well. So the station is moving, the plane is moving. So the distance between them is not constant. I don't know how he popped into that space.
Yeah, it's one of those things where so this comes to the other character voice thing I had actually. So Hickman reportedly loves Monet. And we get her as a sort of field leader here, which I am totally into. But Monet is another one that, much like Emma, tends to like have a little bit of sass to her know-it-allness that has to do with like her kind of always being ahead of people psychically. Yeah. And instead she felt very information dumpy. And it seems like for all of the freaking information dumping she does, the few times she has word balloons, she could have easily just said, we've matched trajectories with the station. Like it just needed one line. Yeah. So like on one side, I'm not going to get that upset about it because it's like, well, it's just one line. Like we can all assume that it happened. But on the other side, like, come on, man. Like this is why we have these characters with us. Like
I'm just gonna say we have reached the peak nerdiness over here, where it's like there's character who can BAMF, but we're talking about real life physics.
Well, that's always, but to be fair, that has always been the limitation that Claremont and other authors have put on his power to make it not a get out of jail free card. That like he can't just get out of any situation or get into any situation. The same way that Kitty with breathing, and Tyler brought us through this on an earlier episode. Like they've all got their way that they're fallible, and so it was just kind of funny.
Right.
Anyway, I also love his new sword. He's not like using like a little fencing foil anymore. He's got like I don't know, is it a cutlass? I don't know what it is, but it looks larger and much more substantial.
Yeah, I am not up enough on my types of swords to be able to name what it is that he's using, but it's a bigger sword.
It's a bigger sword. I'll have to ask my brother who does stage combat too.
So I'm just gonna say, like, I have to say that if we're gonna be talking about realisticness of things, how is Slim not dying of heat stroke and that tight like bodice, like, it just
unstable molecules is the answer to that question every single time.
He's apparently close.
Well, not the way he sassed off to the Fantastic Four. He is not getting any more of those Richards unstable molecules. Let me tell you.
Maybe this is time to bring back that Eric the Red picture.
Yeah, because that costume can breathe. Let me tell you.
Guns in the first act really need to go off in the third. So let's get that Eric the Red picture.
Yeah, because I was thinking about that. I'm like, oh my god, you're gonna go close to the sun and talk about. I think you talked about that. Oh, why Jean Grey was wearing that? Because she's gonna be close to the sun. She's gonna be hot. So it's but Slim, on the other hand, just decided to lock himself up over there. Oh my God, what is this?
The best part is I'll have to see if I can find the.
No, this is Cyclops.
This is hilarious because even in the animated series, it still pretty much comes off as bondage gear worn over a harness.
So yes, this was originally a fake identity and outfit that Cyclops came up with to sneak himself into, I want to say, like Mesmero's base. I guess he thought Magneto was there. Magneto turned out to be a robot later on. But
yeah, this is like high quality late Silver
like
Age.
this is the craziest, stupidest plot. There is no reason for him to be doing this at all. But he dressed himself up in this like leather Viking bondage gear to sneak himself into a supervillain's lair.
I'm also a bad mutant.
And then later, a completely different supervillain shows up, also dressed in that exact same outfit and calling himself Eric the Red, and we never find out why. We're 40 years later. We have never found out why that supervillain decided to take on Cyclops' bondage identity.
Here's my question. He's trying to sneak into someone wearing that.
That was his incognito sneak into a villain's lair outfit.
I see someone that I'm like, who are you, Matt? Who is this person? Like, this is like, talk about drawing.
I guess, to be fair, if he's trying to disguise who he is, what is the thing that Scott Summers would be least likely to put on? I'm going to say that outfit. If you think that guy is anybody, it's not Cyclops.
I was thinking that's Wolverine. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it helps to explain why he later winds up with Emma. Who knows?
So with that,
so we have one more data page to talk about, I think, before
Lord.
we've gone through everything in this issue. And that is our Krakoan alphabet, our full Krakoan alphabet for the first time. And I think that there are actually some interesting facts that they're giving us here on this page. Does anybody want to have like first input on what we're being told here?
That is not native, and that Krakow has his own language.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting, I thought. And it actually, like, if we look at some of the metaphors that have been put forward here, I think it actually gets into a little bit of like touchy political allegorizing. And I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but I think it's there because we're told in this data page, first of all, that Krakoan, as we know it, is the mutants' first autochthonous language, meaning it arises from the land itself. Except we're told later in that data page that that's actually not true. There is a language of Krakoa, and this is the first time that we're hearing Krakoa referred to as what it is, what he is, which is a living mutant in its own right. It's not just a land that they're settling on. And Krakoa has his own language, and it's not what the mutants are speaking. Only Doug can understand it, and Doug invented another language that's been imposed on top of it. So it's really interesting to change this metaphor from mutants no longer settling on a virgin land that nobody else was on before to call their own country, but instead effectively colonizing a pre-existing culture, and that culture is the living Krakoa.
And I'll do you one further. This absolutely connects to the version of Krakoa that we saw connected with Doug Ramsey in the Apocalypse Life in Life 9. So this is not, this is very much a Moira-driven plot. It did not happen by mistake unless it's one of these universal constants. Mm-hmm. She said, oh, by the by, we need Doug to create a symbiotic relationship with this island and possibly subjugate it. Whereas in the previous life, it's the other way around. The island is walking around as a person, and he's got Doug's eyeball on a stick. Mm-hmm. Like they've merged, but you get the sense that the dominant thing is Krakoa. And this is the other way around. Doug has subjugated Krakoa.
So, and look at how many things Doug, by the way, is at the nexus of now. Because we have Doug as a mutant himself. We have Doug as the interface, the person, the only person speaking with and communicating with Krakoa. So who knows whose side he's on in that relationship. And we have Doug with the arm and probably more of his good friend Warlock. So that's Doug as machine. Doug and Warlock, is of course, connects to the Phalanx. So we have Doug now sitting right at the nexus of all of the different species factions that we've seen brought into this story.
So one of my question is, and I think Tyler has something to say. But before that, is Krakoa was ever a human looking, or what his what?
No, Krakoa looks like an island. Krakoa is a living being. Krakoa is a mutant, but the body of Krakoa is the island, and Krakoa is in fact a collection of different mutants that are taken into that island as he absorbs them. So it's sort of a collective entity of mutants that is itself a mutant in its own right.
So what time Krakoa came around? Like first
Giant Size X-Men #1. That's when we first meet Krakoa having captured the original team of X-Men that the new team of X-Men have to rescue.
They put a little retcon on it in a one-shot earlier this year. I'm interested if Hickman had any influence on that at all. But the other thing is that Krakoa, kind of like Ego, the living planet, can create life on himself. Like in Giant Size X-Men, like there's all sorts of flora and fauna that are attacking the X-Men, and that's being generated by Krakoa in the same way that if you land on Ego, he basically creates like mitochondria that are his army on the body of his
I was kind of connecting him more to Mogo the planet in Green Lantern, because he is a lantern. Like
it's the same thing. That's DC.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to veto any discussion of Green Lantern here because I'm just going to have to kill myself.
Hey, guess what?
We can talk about anything. I don't care what we talk about. We're not talking about Green Lantern.
What if it's not Hal though? What if it was a good Green Lantern like Kyle?
Sure. John Stewart, Kyle Rayner. Yeah, all day. If Hal Jordan comes into this conversation once, I'm getting up and walking away.
I mean, that's also my policy. I would just like to make it clear. I hate Hal Jordan.
And mind you, I'm on record saying I think he's a bag of harpies. I'm on record saying that.
Wrong channel.
That's true. Wrong channel. But the thing is, what we're saying that Mogo, he was actually supposed to be only one issue created by Alan Moore in 1985, and he was just supposed to be just one planet who later we found out is a sentient being and also a lantern. I just thought it was an interesting thing. That's all.
Well, that would have been about a decade after Giant Size. So I guess if anything, Moore was ripping off X-Men. But
he was ripping off Ego the Living Planet. It's clearly Ego the Living Planet.
That too. Okay, so Moore was ripping off a lot of Marvel comics. I think is what we could say.
I'm not saying that it is. I'm just saying that when Krakoa being sentient planet and everything, it just kind of reminded me of that he's part of that community as well, and he's also providing a space for them, because that's something Mogo the Living Planet does. He provides space for everyone except for Hal Jordan, because he's a space heartbeat. Anyway.
And if we've learned anything here, it's wait until we get a DC thing that we can talk about, because if you think we're rude about Marvel stuff that we don't like, you're not even ready for how rude we're going to get.
Are you kidding? Grant Morrison is writing Hal Jordan as Green Lantern right now. It is better for the world that I'm not on YouTube talking about that every week.
Right, same, yeah.
I know.
No, anyway, so I just wanted to point out that it was shown on panel that Doc was speaking to Krakoa in a different language.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the first issue.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because I tried to decipher what was being said and I couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, it was mentioned back in that issue that only Doug could speak to Krakoa.
Yeah.
Which connects us back to this idea of the technopaths in Sleeping Giant. Doug is another one of these characters, that Sage as well, who we see working alongside Doug in issue 1. This has Moira's fingerprints on it, and I think we have to wonder, what has she been up to all this time? Because if we go back to that black chart page, the way that it is phrased about that she and Xavier are, having the technopaths work on the Sleeping Giant system is the first time that we've really had an implication that Moira's hand is being felt in the present. Otherwise, so far as we know, she faked her own death and she's just in Tahiti sipping on a drink. But now we're getting the sense that no, she is still actually actively. The thing that it actually says is Moira and Charles discover Orchis through Sleeping Giant. And they've discovered Orchis pretty recently because it's just been going into effect in the last 6 to 9 months, if we trust what we learned in the first issue. So this is our first indication that A, Moira is definitely still around, and B, Xavier is in communication with her.
We don't know what form she's in. For all we know, she's a disembodied consciousness.
Right, she could be a ghost in the machine at this point.
But some Moira of some form is around and active.
She's Mother.
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 Mm-hmm. I'm suppressing so many movie quotes and songs and like Drag Race references every time somebody says "call me mother" about anybody, and you just have to know that I'm keeping it really tight over here, and I'm resisting.
I think we all respect that.
Not mother, Martha.
Mother,
the one that the brain in the jar.
Oh, Martha.
Yeah.
Martha.
Oh, that is
Okay.
effing interesting because Martha appears shortly after Moira's supposed death.
Hmm.
And with that,
Okay.
I mean, we initially thought this was going to be only a 30-minute show, but look at us.
I swear we don't just say that to say it. Like, we really do start every show back behind the scenes before the curtain is drawn going, this is going to be a short one.
I was pretty sure I had nothing to say about this issue.
And look at us. And the thing is, like, we had a little bit of I think, opinion on this, but I think we have earned it because we've been very positive about it so far. So once again, and the quality of the show you're getting, that's exactly how the issue actually reads. So, we're leaving you on a high. The issue leaves you on a kind of high, but, they're going to come back with House of, next week it's going to be House of X4, right? It's not House of 10, it's House of X4. And we're going to be back to talk about House of X4. So hopefully it's going to be much more enthusiastic and, a lot more happening that we can discuss. And we'll try our best again to keep it 30 minutes and then go on for 2 hours. So, that's what you come here for. Detailed analysis, my pretties. And with that, once again, rate, review, subscribe, do all of that jazz, the way. And, follow us on our Twitter and follow Peter and Zach on Twitter to hear more about X-Men stuff. So, Peter, why don't you sign us off?
All right.